Greetings, YouTube. Recently, I found myself thinking about the calendars that we use in gaming campaigns, whether they be fantasy or science fiction. Now, obviously, if you're using a campaign setting set in the real world, post-apocalyptic or modern, what have you, or it's a fantasy setting based in the real world, you just use the calendar we have. Unless, of course, you're setting it in a different time period or in a different culture, then you would use the calendar system that they used then. And you have lots of historic references, so you don't have to really reinvent the wheel in that case. But most of us play in systems where they're not set on Earth, so we have a different calendar system. Now, I like to make it just different enough for the characters to realize they're not here, but simple enough that I don't have to do a lot of work. Because I'll be honest, I really don't want to keep track of all the conceivable things that a fully dynamic calendar like we have would entail. For example, we've got 12 months, but the months have different days, and that's kind of annoying. It has an odd number of days, and that itself can be somewhat frustrating because days move around the year. So, today is September 18th at the time of this filming, so it's a Friday. It won't be Friday, September 18th next year. That happens. It moves around. For example, my birthday is September 4th, and there were times when I began school on my birthday. It sucked. So what I do for the most part, if I'm using an original campaign, like an original homebrew fantasy setting, I just throw in a 13-month calendar with 28-day months, with 4 7-day weeks. And sometimes if I want to keep, that brings it up to 364 days. And if I want to throw in an extra day to make it up so the day is exactly the same length as, the year is exactly the same length as ours, I have it be a phantom day. A day of festivals and frivolity that kind of like is off the books. So lots of things take place on that day, like affairs and thieving and social mores are broken on that day. And most people turn a blind eye so long as it isn't over the top. Egregious social, violations are still punished, but a lot of the minor things just kind of skate under the radar on that day. And that's pretty much what I use all the time in fantasy settings because it's easy to remember. Sometimes I'll have a system of holidays. Lots of times I don't. I'll just, I'll throw in, because it's nice even months. Nice even seasons, 4 seasons. So I'll just have solstice and, equinox events and things like that. Very simple things. If I give them special names, cool. If I don't, cool. There have been settings that gave detailed calendars, and I have a hard time keeping track of those things as well sometimes. Well, I guess you could have an app or something that did that for you. You just tell it how much time has progressed, but I don't have an app that does that, or any software that does that. Is there software that does that? Tell me, folks. Is there apps out there designed to suit specific campaign settings? For example, is there an app for Greyhawk and for Forgotten Realms and for Dark Sun and for Ravenloft, things like that? Are there apps that would keep track of those calendars? That's an interesting idea. I'm not going to do anything with it, but tell me. And in science fiction games, and again, if they're set here, no problem. But I've used them on other planets. For example, a long-run Gamma World campaign was on a planet called New Tau, and I had a different, year was a different length, and they had weeks that were 10 days long. And I, off the top of my head, don't even remember how long the year was. Off the top of my head, I do not remember. It may never have come up. It really may never have come up. The world, where they lived was like wet, dry seasons, so there weren't huge variations in temperature. It was precipitation that was the big thing. So as long as you knew when the wet and dry seasons were cycling through, that's what mattered. It was a warm world, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I know, it was too homogenous to be a real live planet. I get that. I was buying into certain trope because it was, again, it was easy. No one ever complained because no one ever seemed to notice it, because all those other worlds out there that we've seen in science fiction and fantasy games and movies and books and stuff that have ubiquitous, even homogenous settings have all set up people to accept that. So it makes it a lot easier for GMs who want a warm world or a desert world, or a water world, etc., etc. Um, but one of the things I've been playing with is trying to set up a science fiction dating system that isn't planetary bound. Sort of a Stardate system. Now, I know that there are actual ways of figuring out the Star Trek Stardate system. I don't know what it is. I think at one time I may have had a vague idea how it functioned. I no longer do at all. It's like the fact that I used to know how to read music. I can't read music at all any longer. So I've been playing with the idea of having a Stardate style calendar so that you could have this in use for things like generation ships or habitats that orbit gas giants or planets that are not habitable for mining or or gathering other resources. Things that are set into things like asteroid belts, whether they're like the ones between Jupiter and Mars, or like an Oort cloud way far out there, or the Kuiper belt. So you're not going to be tied to the planetary cycles on the inner worlds at all. If you're in a generation ship, you're not tied to anything. So why continue to keep that calendar around from Earth if you're not on Earth anymore? So I think I would keep a 24-hour day because we biologically seem to be well suited to that. But it would be exactly 24 hours. There would be no like leap second crap. No, it'd be exactly 24 hours and not worry about it. I would also use military time, 0000 at midnight, 0100 at 1 minute after, and just use up to 2400 for the whole calendar for the whole day. None of this AM PM stuff because that's much less accurate. I have a friend of mine that actually screwed up connecting with someone while they were at an airport because they didn't grasp the whole AM PM thing well because they were from a country where they never used it. And I agree with them. At work now, I always try to make my notations on my paperwork in military time. Though at home, I still think in AM PMs. Kind of like I try to use metric as much as possible, even though I think in American standard measurements. Or is it called imperial? I don't know, but it's not imperial anymore now, is it? So I decided keep the day, but have a 1,000-day year. Now, if you wanted to keep it truly metric, you would call it a kiloday. And then you could have a deciday, which would be 10 days long. Or what would be what's the 100 unit? I can't remember the name for the 100 units. Is it deca? Deca day? Yeah, I'm not positive. But we're used to calling it a year. So I would still call it a year and just say it's 1,000 days long. Now, this gives you an interesting notation. So I would have day, year, the way Europeans do it, what they do day, month, year, as opposed to Americans that do month, day, year, which confuses the crap out of Europeans and most other parts of the world. Though I think there are actually some parts of the world that do a year, month, day. It's strange. But you would do day, year. And the days would go from 000, the first day of the year, to 999, the last day of the year, point, dot, and then the year. So the first day of this calendar would be 000.0. And each day would be... This system means that every day of your life counts for you because you would be... A person would be 1.628 years old. Exactly. They had 1 year, 682 days long. I said 682 to 9628. I don't know. I hope I'd get that right. But you get the point. So you obviously, I'm thinking in a science fiction setting, you would have apps keeping track of this, and artificial intelligence, or maybe chips in your head to keep track of it. You would not be counting the days every single day. That would be annoying. But you'd be used to using that to the point where you would think nothing of it. And so like a 10-year-old would be, I think, about 27 in our time. And a person that lived to be 50 would be like 136. So that's really old. So that's an ancient person. But of course, in a science fiction setting, with enough advances in medical technology and such, you could well live to be 50 or older, say, if you have digital citizens. And of course, that brings up how time functions for digital citizens who would be able to experience the universe in a far more rapid rate than those of us stuck into the meat space. But that's probably a different video. But I like this idea because, again, 3 digits, dot, and then the year. Your age is 11.248. Bingo. That's how old you are. You're 11 years, 248 days old. Now, New Year's and birthdays become much more significant. And I think that's good. I think a lot of people don't appreciate New Year's days and birthdays quite enough. It's just like, yeah, you kiss somebody at midnight kind of thing. But this would be much more significant. It could be only happening once every 1,000 days. And birthdays would be more significant. Now, you may want to have more rapid celebrations for younger kids or not. They just get socially used to the fact that when they turn around 8, that's around the equivalent, a little after 8 and a half, I think it is, that's equivalent of being about 16. So now you're essentially a legal adult. I always thought that 16 should be the age of legal adulthood. Biologically, you're pretty much capable of making decisions for yourself, even though your frontal lobe does not actually finish developing until you are around 25 Terran years. It would be a slightly different number, of course, in my decimal calendar. So you end up with a kind of a star date system, which isn't too horrible to convert from ours. I think it's less complex than the stardate system that was used in Star Trek. I don't remember what it was. If anybody can remember how to do that, cool, tell me. There's probably some site out there that'll convert it for you. I would not be surprised. Star Trek fans are dedicated. So I've just been musing about calendars, essentially. So tell me, what kind of calendars have you used in campaigns? Do you use a kind of a generic fantasy calendar like I do with a 13-month calendar with 28 days each? Do you have a star date type system? Or you just use, in a science fiction setting, do you just continue to use the Earth calendar regardless of where it is? Or does each planet have its own calendar, which could make time conversions even more complex, particularly if you have some kind of subspace instantaneous communication, super luminal communication kind of thing. So tell me, what do you do with calendars in your campaign?